In this video, we will be looking at the defensive systems on board the Mirage 2000C, used to counter both physical and electronic attacks. We will go over the use of the SPIRALE decoy dispenser and the Éclair decoy expansion option, the SERVAL radar warning receiver, the D2M missile launch warning system, and the SABRE jammer, looking at various different situations in which each system can be used independently or in conjunction with the others. Hello fellow virtual aviators, we are back in the cool and calculating Mirage 2000C, and today we are looking at the various self-preservation options we have available to us in the sense of countermeasures and electronic warfare. The Mirage has a good suite of different defensive applications we can use to help ensure we make it back from our sorties alive. There is, however, a significant amount to cover in this tutorial, as they are combined into a single integrated system. Hence, they are best covered together. On the flip side of this, the system is both comprehensive and easy to use once understood. It is another beautiful day in the Persian Gulf, but everything is not all rosy. Rogue elements of a foreign power have established ground-based anti-air assets on Keshem and Tumb Islands in the Strait of Hormuz, an early warning radar on the island of Hormuz itself, a frigate patrolling between the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, and our airborne early warning and control colleagues have detected the presence of flights of enemy aircraft operating from the north, one of which we are engaging now. The enemy assets are threatening civilian air traffic, and we have been tasked with dealing with them. The systems we have available to us are similar to other airframes of the era, namely the SPIRALE chaff and flare dispenser and the Éclair chaff and flare expansion pack, the SERVAL radar warning receiver, the SABRE integrated electronic jammer, and the D2M missile launch warning system. SPIRALE stands for Système de Protection Infrarouge et Radar par l'Orage, roughly translated, meaning infrared and radar decoy protection system. The system consists of 2 chaff and 2 flare dispensers located at the aircraft's rear. As the storage and release mechanisms in the dispensers differ for chaff and flare, the number of countermeasures is fixed and cannot be changed. We have 112 chaff and 16 flares. As usual, chaff is used to counter radar-based systems by dispensing reflective surfaces into the air which confuse their signals. Flares are used against infrared-based systems by providing an alternative heat source to distract heat seekers. Interestingly, the SPIRALE chaff dispensers cut the chaff to different lengths depending on the threat detected by the Mirage's other countermeasure systems, making them relatively effective. Due to a limitation in DCS, the sliders for chaff and flare quantities in the rearming window should not be adjusted and should be left on their default settings of 234 and 64 respectively. 16 flares is relatively limited, so the countermeasure loadout can be boosted by use of an Éclair pod, which is added on hardpoint option 10. The pod contains additional racks of chaff and flares and takes the place of the drag chute attached to the underside of the fuselage. If an Éclair pod is equipped, just remember that the drag chute cannot be utilized. 2 different versions of the pod are available. The standard Éclair pod, which boosts our countermeasure loadout by a fixed amount of 16 chaff and flares, or the superior Éclair M pod, which has 7 different configurations based around combinations of 18 chaff and 8 flares, allowing us to more customize our overall countermeasure loadout. So let's boost up our number of flares by taking the Éclair M6/0 configured pod, which gives us an additional 48 flares.
Request rearming.
Éclair pods are fully integrated with the SPIRALE system and do not require separate configurations or key bindings in the cockpit. Two HOTAS switches are required to be bound. The manual decoy release button, labelled decoy program release, found on the control stick, and the decoy panic release button, found on the throttle. The majority of the countermeasure systems in the Mirage 2000C are controlled by the PCCM, the Poste de Commande Countermeasure, or countermeasure control panel, located here on the right console. We will look at each of these switches in turn, but first let's set up our decoy launchers. The switches are erroneously labelled JAM in the English cockpit, but correctly labelled LL, lance-leur, or decoy launchers in the French cockpit. The mode switch sets the behaviour of the launchers. Off, or A for arrêt, obviously disables the system. SA, standing for semi-automatic, powers the system and will release the program of decoy countermeasures at the pilot's command when the manual decoy release button is depressed. This is the most common setting used. In automatic mode, the system is powered and will automatically release the program of decoys when a launch threat is detected by the radar warning receiver or missile launch warning system. More on these later. Automatic mode may be useful if you are entering an area of operation where threats are highly likely, for example, a low-level strike against an airfield, but will only work when other defensive systems like the radar warning receiver are powered. Let's set the mode to semi-automatic. How many chaff and flares are released, and the time between each release with each dispense depends on the program selected, with this, the program selector knob. The SPIRALE system has 10 different programs, each comprising of a different number of decoys released at different intervals, and in some cases, in more than one cycle or burst. Each program is designed to be used in a different scenario, and a summary of each can be found on the pilot's kneeboard. So let's bring up the kneeboard, and we can see here on this page the chaff/flare programs. Programs 1 to 3 are used in beyond visual range combat, countering radar-based systems. Each program has the same burst or cycle of chaff, but programs 2 and 3 repeat the burst 2 and 3 times respectively. Programs 4 and 5 are for use in close combat. Program 5 is best used when the type of missile used against you is unknown or unpredictable, as it combines both chaff and flare. Programs 6 and 7 are for use against long-range radar-guided SAMs, with Program 7 being more effective against sophisticated systems such as S-300s. Program 8 is designed to counter infrared SAMs such as Strelas and manpads when flying at low level. Program 9, known as the air-to-ground mix, combines Programs 7 and 8, and is the most effective all-round protection when penetrating a well-defended area at low altitude. Program 10 is a flare dump, and is used to quickly get rid of your flares in an emergency, for example, when there is a threat of an onboard fire. Remember to select the most appropriate program before entering the combat zone, which will obviously be determined by the mission parameters and mission intelligence. Alternatively, the program selector knob can be set to A for automatic. In this instance, the SPIRALE system will select an appropriate program based on the highest threat detected by your other countermeasure systems, for example, the radar warning receiver. There is also a preset panic dispense program, which combines a moderate mix of chaff and flare when the threat against you is unexpected or unknown. This can always be immediately released by pressing the decoy panic release button on the throttle. Okay, so we are now airborne, and let's just quickly demonstrate the use of the decoy countermeasures. Let's make sure the system is powered and in semi-automatic mode, and we will select program 3, which is a BVR chaff program. We will then, to dispense the decoys, press the manual decoy program release switch on the HOTAS, which we have bound, and we will see that this program will release 18 chaff in total in 3 bursts of 6. Alternatively, pressing the panic release switch on the throttle, we will release our panic program of 6 chaff and 3 flares. And again. We know the SPIRALE system and any Éclair pod installed are powered and functioning, as this indicator light below the VCM countermeasure display, labelled J in the English cockpit and LL in the French cockpit, will illuminate. If the light is flashing, this indicates a fault or that you have no decoys remaining. The status of our decoy countermeasures is also monitored on this panel here. When our program of countermeasures are being dispensed, the blue-green LL light will blink. Be aware that if our program contains a mix of chaff and flare, and we have run out of one of them, the LL light may not blink even if the other remaining decoy is being dispensed. When we are low on or out of a particular decoy, other lights will indicate this. The amber IR light indicates low quantity of flares when flashing and out of flares when steady. Similarly, the amber EM light indicates the same for chaff. There is a third amber light on the panel labelled EO for electro-optical countermeasures, which is not used in this version of the Mirage 2000C. The lights on this panel can be permanently extinguished by pressing the EFF Effacement button. To help the pilot maintain better situational awareness of the potential threats that may be in the vicinity, the Mirage 2000C is equipped with the SERVAL radar warning receiver, or RWR. Feel free to skip the next section if you are already familiar with the concepts of an RWR, but first, a short presentation on some important concepts. In this briefing, we are looking at the principles of a radar warning receiver, specifically the SERVAL system found in the Mirage 2000C. SERVAL is an acronym of the phrase Système d'écoute radar et de visualisation de l'alerte. In French, the Radar Listening and Alert Display System. Onboard radar warning receivers, or RWRs, are different and separate systems to an aircraft's radar used for interception and weapons employment. An RWR listens for the radio signals of other radar emitters, such as aircraft, SAM systems, ships, or other surface installations, using a series of antennae around the aircraft. When a signal is detected, various parameters are measured, such as the emitting radar's frequency, direction, signal pulse repetition, and shape. Data on these measurements is then processed and analysed by an onboard system such as a computer, and a visual warning is displayed to the pilot on some form of display. The purpose of this is for situational awareness. The pilot now knows that there is some sort of radar-emitting entity close by which could prove to be an enemy. The SERVAL RWR display in the Mirage 2000C, like many other Western and NATO aircraft, takes the form of a circular screen, with the centre of the circle here marked with a cross representing our own aircraft. Consider this situation here, where a hostile aircraft is at our 2 o'clock, but out of our visual range at 60 nautical miles. The hostile has their radar switched off, so we do not detect a signal, and so does not appear on the radar warning receiver's display. If the hostile was to then enable their radar in a low-powered search mode, the RWR would likely detect this and display a symbol on the screen, together with an appropriate warning noise to alert the pilot. The azimuth from the center of the circle to the symbol indicates the rough direction in which the hostile aircraft is. As the parameters of existing radar systems are known, a specific symbol can be displayed to alert the pilot to what type of emitter has been detected. In this case, an uppercase M symbol indicates a MiG-29 fulcrum. If the hostile was to commence interception, close the distance and place us into a radar lock, such as a single target track, the change in the radar's signal strength and pulse repetition can be detected by the RWR and further alert the pilot with additional symbology and warnings. In the case of the SERVAL RWR in the Mirage, a chevron symbol is placed under the locking emitter and a severe sounding tone is sounded. Many RWRs, including the SERVAL, can also differentiate when a radar emitter is supporting a radar-guided missile. Again, further symbology and a more distinctly severe tone is sounded to warn the pilot that defensive measures must be employed. In the case of the SERVAL, the additional symbol is a chevron above the emitter symbol, with both chevrons now flashing. The antennae of most RWRs, including the SERVAL, act in 360 degrees in the lateral plane, so radar emitters can be detected behind and to the flanks. However, due to the limitations of the system, and to avoid confusing the pilot, there are blind spots directly above and below the aircraft, which can result in misleading readings, which we will see later. It is also important to note that the distance between the center of the display and the emitter symbol does not necessarily correspond with the distance to the emitter itself, but refers to the signal strength and threat rating of the emitter. In the situation here, the 4 radar emitters surrounding us have been detected. 2 friendly FA-18 Hornets to our 7 o'clock, an enemy SA-8 OSA surface-to-air missile launcher at our 4 o'clock, and an enemy MiG-25 Foxbat at our 10 o'clock. Distinct symbols for each type of emitter are displayed on the screen, but note that although it is further away compared to the Hornets, the Foxbat symbol appears closer to us as its signal is stronger and poses a greater threat. Notice also that there is no way to distinguish friend from foe on this type of RWR. Thank you for listening. Now let's see how the SERVAL radar warning receiver is employed in our beloved Mirage 2000C. Before proceeding, I would recommend that in the Mirage 2000C options under the Special tab, the more distinctive RWR launch alert tone is enabled. Whilst this isn't strictly realistic, it will help more readily distinguish between a radar lock and a missile launch. Demonstrations in this tutorial will be completed with the setting enabled. First, let's power up the RWR. Place the RWR, or Detector d'Alert DA switch in the French cockpit, into the central on or marche position. The third light on the VCM countermeasure display, labelled RWR or DA, will illuminate to indicate the system is powered and operating normally. Likewise, if this is the case, a cross symbol should be shown in the center of the display. The brightness of the symbols on the screen can be adjusted with the VCM brightness knob here. Any detected radar emitters will be displayed on the screen, indicated by a particular green symbol. At present, we have detected a single radar emitter at our 10 o'clock, shown by the circle symbol. This indicates an AWACS aircraft. A catalogue of the symbols can be found on the pilot's kneeboard, on the Menace's VCM page. So let's bring up the kneeboard. And we can see that the small open circle corresponds to an AWACS. Each symbol corresponds to a different type of radar emitter, and the SERVAL system is capable of processing and displaying up to 8 emitter symbols at any one time. The display is split into 2 zones, delineated by the teal-coloured circle. The outer zone is the low threat zone. If a symbol appears here, the SERVAL system has determined that the emitter is either unable to employ weapons against you, or poses little threat if they do, based on their signal strength and type. The inner zone is the high threat zone. Symbols appearing here indicate the emitter should be considered a potential and immediate threat. Based on their signal strength and weapons carried by that type, they are within weapons employment range. Occasionally, the RWR will lose the signal from an emitter, and it will disappear from the screen. Here, the AWACS symbol has suddenly vanished. Be aware that this doesn't necessarily mean the emitter has been destroyed or has left the area of operation. It could simply mean that they have switched off their radar. Each time a signal is detected, its appropriate symbol will be displayed, and a 1 kHz tone will be sounded for half a second to alert us to review the display. Here we have redetected the AWACS, indicated by the circle, and also detected a ground-based early warning radar, indicated by the uppercase C symbol. Let's continue to fly north towards the enemy assets and observe what happens. There's the new threat tone, and we can see that we have now detected a component of an SA-5 SAM site, roughly at R12 o'clock. The SA-5 is currently operating in search mode. It is using its radar to detect targets, but it hasn't yet locked us up. In quick succession, our situation has changed. The new threat tone sounded again. This time we have detected a MiG-21 fishbed off to our 8 o'clock, indicated by the arrowhead-like symbol. But also, the SA-5 has placed us into a tracking radar lock. This was indicated by the more severe sounding 1 kHz tone, which was chopped at 25 Hz. Hearing this, we should immediately review the display. The chevron beneath the 5 symbol shows which emitter is locking us. Most likely, the SA-5 will be preparing to launch against us, so we will need to monitor this carefully. And there we go, the SA-5 has launched and its radar systems are supporting the missile against us. Notice the severe sounding and continuous tone. Our emitter symbol is now surrounded by 2 flashing chevrons, and the warning tone is inciting us to take defensive action. So let's turn away and we'll pop some chaff. The SA-5 is an older system, and the emitter symbols remain in the low threat zone, suggesting a long-range shot. So we should easily be able to defeat them by turning away and diving to help expend their kinetic energy. There are plenty of tutorials on defensive tactics, including countermeasures, notching and terrain masking, but in general turning away and diving into denser air whilst releasing chaff is a straightforward defense against this sort of system. Okay, we are now flying perpendicular to the presumed location of the SA-5, but have not yet redetected it. And there we go, spoke too soon. It's reappeared along with the early warning radar off to our 3 o'clock. We've also just detected an SA-6 system, roughly off to our 12 o'clock as well. The SA-5 has locked us up and its symbol is close to the high threat zone. We've also been locked by the SA-6. And here we go, SA-5 launched. Can't see the missile in the air, but let's start our defensive measures. And the SA-6 has also launched against me, indicated by the 2 chevrons flashing on the screen. You can't see the SA-5, but there's the SA-6 missiles, so let's turn away and pop that chaff. We're now nice and low, the SA-5 symbol has faded, and I think we've evaded the SA-6 also. We'll come round again to once again bait the SA-6 into launching against us. The SA-6 warning is in the low threat zone, so hopefully by attempting to notch the emitter supported by chaff we should be able to evade its missiles. There's the smoke trails in the air. And 2 explosions mark the self-destruction of the missiles. We should be more worried about the MiG-21 fishbed symbol within the high threat zone, with us in a single target track radar lock. And there it is, right on our tail. In this instance, we have a bogey locked up with our radar in a P6 single target track. We have also detected it on the RWR, the M symbol indicating that it is a MiG-29 Fulcrum, suggesting that it is a bandit. Because we have the Fulcrum locked in PSIC, we will be appearing on their RWR equipment and giving them situational awareness of us. To reduce this, we could switch our radar to silent, forcing him to rely on his radar to keep tabs on us, rather than both systems. Let's maintain the radar lock to provoke him into launching against us. The Fulcrum now has us locked up and is moving into the high threat zone, so we should expect a shot anytime soon. And there we go. Notice here that the emitter has suddenly disappeared from the countermeasure display. This is because by turning our Mirage's belly towards the Fulcrum, we have placed it into an RWR blind spot. We must always remember to be mindful of this to avoid thinking we have successfully evaded the missile. It is still most definitely heading towards us. As we continue to turn out of the blind spot, the Fulcrum will reappear. In this instance, for demonstration, we will set our decoy dispense mode to automatic and our program to automatic selection. Here we are facing an enemy Mirage F1. When detected on the RWR, it displays as an uppercase U, the generic symbol for an unknown emitter. We have the enemy locked up and within range of our own Super 530Ds, but we will allow them to loose off a missile against us to demonstrate the automatic countermeasures. And here we can see that when the missile launch has been detected and our emitter is bound by 2 chevrons on the display, the countermeasures are automatically being dispensed. It appears the SERVAL has selected one of the BVR programs to dispense the chaff. In this instance, we have detected an enemy F-16 off our nose, indicated by the asterisk symbol on the countermeasure display. The F-16 is likely armed with AIM-120 active radar homing missiles, which can be launched without placing the target into a single target track. Let's lock up the F-16 with our own radar and observe what happens. We have the F-16 locked and ranged at 42 nautical miles. The RWR tells us they have not placed us into a single target track radar lock, as there is no chevron below the emitter symbol. This could have the effect of lulling us into a false sense of security, and fool us into thinking they are not targeting ourselves. At 26 nautical miles, they have entered the high threat zone, and have still not locked us up. But watch what happens on the VTB radar screen. The F-16 begins to maneuver away into a crank. This suggests that he has fired an AIM-120 and is aiding its guidance using his RWS or TWS modes. When the AIM-120 is in range, it will turn on its own radar, going pitbull, and then guide itself towards us. An active radar missile is indicated by an uppercase W symbol on the countermeasure display, which has suddenly appeared in the high threat zone. Modern jets with Fox 3 type missiles can utilize this tactic to get the jump on us, so it is important to use the combined intelligence from all our sensors and systems to avoid falling prey. One other interesting feature of the countermeasure display is observed when using the TAF GCI system. If an enemy aircraft is within 10 nautical miles, the TAF Command and Control Center can send a signal to our Mirage 2000C, causing a large capital M to be displayed instead of the usual plus symbol. The M stands for menace, the French word for threat, but can also be thought of as standing for merge. This should not be wholly relied upon. A threat could easily be within 10 nautical miles, but if the TAF has not sent you the signal, the M indication will not appear. The SERVAL RWR will only detect radar-based threats. However, the D2M missile launch warning system can be used in conjunction with the SERVAL to detect short-range surface-to-air missile launches. The system must be added to the Mirage 2000C by equipping infrared sensor fairings to the rear of the Magic 2 missile pylons. The sensors act approximately in 360 degrees in the lateral plane, but are primarily aimed downwards against threats from the ground. As the system uses infrared sensors, it can detect non-radar guided missiles such as manpads. However, there are some limitations to the system. Firstly, the missile's rocket motor must be actively burning to be detected. If they have already expended all their fuel and are coasting towards their target, they will not be detected. Secondly, the system detects all burning rocket motors in the vicinity, even if they are not traveling towards or are not a threat to you, which can lead to misleading warnings on the countermeasure display. To add the system, on pylons 1 and 9, we must select the Magic 2 option with the DDM suffix. The D2M system uses the same coolant reserves as the Magic II missiles themselves. Indeed, using both missile cooling and D2M cooling will half the time you will have in terms of coolant. It is recommended that upon arming the pylons and the system, the Magic IIs are placed in standby to save as much coolant as possible. Just remember to re-enable them when entering the combat zone. The missile launch warning system itself is enabled by placing the switch labelled MLWS or D2M into the center on or march position. For the same reasons as just stated, it is recommended that we do not switch the system on until we need to in order to save the coolant. Okay, so we are about to enter an area of operation where we believe there are ground-based IR missile systems, so let's remember to rearm our magics and we'll switch on the D2M missile launch warning system. The system can take up to 45 seconds to cool to its operating temperature. When the system is ready and functioning, the fourth indicator light on the countermeasure display, labelled MWS or D2M, will illuminate. If the light is flashing, the system has not been equipped, the system has suffered a fault, is not yet cooled, or we have run out of coolant. We are approaching an island and we have been informed that an SA-13 Strela is defending the area. The Strela is infrared guided and has no supporting radar, so there are no emitter symbols appearing on the radar warning receiver. As we overfly, we can expect the Strela to launch against us, after which the D2M system will detect the launch and warn us of the incoming missiles. A detected missile launch is indicated by an uppercase X on the countermeasure display, together with a repeating, high-pitched tone. The azimuth between the center of the display and the X symbol indicates the approximate direction of the threat. The line adjacent to the X symbol indicates the vertical direction in which the missile has been detected. A line below the X indicates the detected missile is below us. A line above the X indicates that the detected missile is above us. Immediate action is recommended on hearing the high-pitched tone, so we will throttle down to reduce our exhaust temperature, pop some flares to act as a decoy, turn away and evade. A final countermeasure option handles the last of the facets of electromagnetic warfare, namely the SABRE electromagnetic jamming and deception system. SABRE stands for Système d'autoprotection de brouillage électromagnétique, roughly translated from French as the electromagnetic jamming self-protection system, whose antennae are built into the tail fin of the Mirage 2000C. No separate pod is required to be equipped. The Sabra ECM jammer aims to protect the aircraft from radar-based systems by reducing the lock range of missiles and by confusing radars through the emission of noise and deceptive signals. The system is computer-controlled and requires minimal pilot input. The SABRE jammer is initiated using these switches here. First, we will power the system by placing the switch marked ECM, or BR, standing for brouilleur, or the French word for jammer, into the center on or marche position. We will then select an operating mode. Standby, or VI in the French cockpit, places the jammer into a background ELINT mode and will not actively jam. The other two options are the main jamming modes. The center position, marked with a square, is the radar priority mode. In this mode, the jammer will attempt to jam emitters that are locking us in a reduced power mode, which allows us to continue to use our own radar. The position marked PCM stands for countermeasure priority. In this mode, the jammer will automatically attempt to jam emitters which are locking the aircraft at full power, which has the effect of disabling our own radar. We also need to have a HOTAS control bound for the PCM manual override, labelled Jammer PCM Override Toggle. This can temporarily force the jammer into PCM mode when in radar priority mode to emit jamming signals in all directions. Of course, enemy aircraft have jammers also, so before we proceed with applying our own jammer, let's observe how the Mirage 2000C responds to being jammed. Here, we will place a bandit into a PSID track while scan, and then into a PSIC single target track. The radar lockbox is marked with 4 tick marks at the vertices, much like a hollowed out cross. This indicates that the locked aircraft is jamming us, and that our fire control and target tracking may suffer degradation and inaccuracy. The additional brew indication, which flashes for approximately 5 seconds before becoming steady, also warns that jamming has been detected. When subject to jamming, indications also appear on the VTB. When in PSIC, the target line becomes dashed and a yellow uppercase B appears in the top left of the screen. In PSID, asterisks appear showing the azimuth and relative strength of the jamming. The more asterisks, the stronger the jamming. Watch how the symbology changes as we change between PSIC and PSID. From PSIC to PSID. Under more extreme and stronger forms of jamming, our own radar can begin to mislead us. Here we have locked up an enemy F-14 Tomcat in PSIC, and we can see from the symbology that it is jamming us. Notice how the ranging scale on the HUD begins to give misleading and ever-changing readings for the distance to the target. As we cannot accurately range the target, and that our fire control may be compromised, we will need to think twice about firing a missile ourselves. Indeed, in some instances here, our SNA is telling us that we are already too close to the target to fire, even though we still can't see it. However, if we are able to close on the target and achieve what is known as burn-through, in other words, we reach a range where the radar can overcome the jamming, we can still achieve a hit even when being jammed. Let's now switch on our own jammer. We will select radar priority mode, as this gives us the most options when responding to threats, but requires a small amount of pilot input. The jammer's status is indicated by the first two lights on the countermeasure display. The first, labeled S or V, indicates that the jammer is powered and gathering ELINT information. The second, labeled ECM or BR, indicates that the jammer is ready to perform or is actively jamming. The SABRE jammer can also act as a radar detector itself, and in some instances will detect an emitter before the SERVAL RWR. If this occurs, the emitter symbol on the countermeasure display will be flanked by two horizontal lines. The SABRE jammer cannot accurately measure the azimuth to the emitter itself, so this type of detection will only appear at the top and bottom of the display, and should generally be understood that the emitter is somewhere off our nose or tail respectively. Let's switch on our missile launch warning system also, so we have all our defensive measures working together. Okay, so we are back in the north, close to the ground-based threats we encountered before. Our jammer is in radar priority mode, and we are going to once again bait the SA-5 into locking and firing on us. So we can see the SA-5 at approximately 11 o'clock, and it's moving towards the high threat zone. As the SA-5 places us into a lock, the symbology is slightly different with our jammer switched on. The emitter symbol on the display is now surrounded by a box. The box indicates that the jammer is working to jam the radar signals of that specific emitter, specifically in a low power mode. This type of jamming is less effective, but allows us to continue to use our own radar, something we may wish to do if we are intercepting airborne targets. We can also see the letters PCM flashing on the countermeasure display, the heads-up display, and the VTB. Flashing PCM symbology means that the integrated countermeasure system is recommending to the pilot that we switch to the countermeasure priority mode by pressing the bound button on the HOTAS as discussed earlier. This is because the system considers the emitter being jammed to be a high threat, and that switching to the high-powered PCM mode will increase the strength of the jamming. In doing so, PCM becomes fixed and our radar becomes non-functional, being placed automatically into silent mode. Pressing the HOTAS button again, and we return to the low-powered radar priority mode. Defensive tactics are as before, but by jamming the signal, we increase our chances of survival. So we've put out some chaff in an attempt to confuse the SA-5, and we'll also switch to full power PCM mode to disrupt the radar further. Notice that on the heads-up display, when PCM mode is active, the letters PCM are surrounded by a box. For our next approach, we'll switch our jammer's mode into countermeasure priority as default. We'll see here that when an emitter locks us up, the SABRE will automatically jam the threat at full power without the need for us to press the HOTAS button. We have a number of threats around us, including at least one MiG-21 fishbed somewhere close on our 6, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Somewhere out there, but I haven't spotted him yet. The SA-6 has locked us up, but notice that the jammer hasn't immediately entered PCM mode. The system has determined that the threat is low, so jamming is not yet required. Jamming has now been established at full power automatically, and our radar is non-operational. And here we go, defense against the SA-6. We can see the smoke in the air. The missile launch warning system detected the SAM, hence the high-pitched tone. Combining decoys, jamming, and a good sense of situational awareness, we can easily defeat mid-tier SAMs such as SA-6 Cubs. Missile defeated. That's a significant threat, fishbed right on our tail. Ah, there he is. We may need our radar for ACM, so let's switch back to radar priority mode on the jammer so we have control. Well, after a bit of to and fro, we've managed to turn him. He's jamming us, as we can see the indications on the hood, but no amount of radar jamming is going to stop a Magic 2. Well, as ever, I hope that was useful for you. As I said, a lot to take in, but once you have mastered the Mirage 2000C's integrated defensive systems, you should be able to hold your own against unwanted advances. With continued thanks to my patrons, especially Jan11, Lakota21, Plabs, Blake Armin, Starlover, and introducing our latest supporter, Tim Kenny. As some of you will be aware, there are reasons for the delay in getting the next tutorials out, so thank you for your patience and your support. It really does mean a lot. Feel free to do the usual thing like subscribe, comment, and share. But until next time, virtual aviators, I look forward to seeing you online in the skies. This is Reiver saying, last call.